You look around today, and AI is, well, it's everywhere. It feels like it just exploded out of nowhere, right? But here's the thing. The real history of AI is this messy, fascinating story full of dead ends, false starts, and some seriously bitter rivalries. Today, we're diving deep into one of the biggest, a clash of titans that literally kicked off the first AI winter and put the brakes on progress for a whole decade.
So let's start with the central mystery. Picture this. It's 1992. The BBC is doing a show and they're talking about this machine, the Perceptron, almost like it's a lost artifact from an ancient civilization. This thing was a revolution, a machine that could actually learn, that was supposed to change the world. And then it just vanished from the conversation. So the big question is, why? How does a machine that could learn just disappear? And this whole story starts somewhere you'd never expect. Not in some fancy university lab with millions in funding. Nope. It all starts in a high school. But this wasn't just any high school. It was basically a factory for geniuses, and it produced two future titans of AI who would go on to become bitter rivals. So in one corner, you've got Marvin Minsky. He was the champion of symbolic AI, the idea that intelligence is all about logic and rules, like a really smart computer program. And in the other corner, you have Frank Rosenblatt. He believed in something totally different, called connectionism. The idea that we could build intelligence by mimicking the wiring of the human brain. Now here's the truly wild part. They graduated just 1 year apart from the exact same school, the Bronx High School of Science. I mean, this place has 9 Nobel laureates. 2 brilliant guys from the same place, about to head down 2 completely opposite paths.
And this is where it gets really ironic. Minsky, the guy who would eventually become the biggest critic of brain-inspired AI, he actually started out as a believer. Back in 1951, he built this crazy contraption called the Snark. It was this wild mess of wires and motors meant to simulate a rat learning a maze. So get this, the man who tried to kill neural networks was actually one of the first people to build one. Then, just a few years later, Rosenblatt drops his bombshell, the Perceptron. And that changes everything.
You have to try and picture this thing, the Mark I Perceptron. It wasn't just code on a screen. It was a giant, physical web of wires, sensors, and electric motors. When it tried to read a letter and got it wrong, you could actually hear these little motors whirring as it physically reconfigured its own wiring to get smarter. It was literally rewiring itself. And the craziest part? It worked. It taught itself to read. Naturally, it became a massive media sensation. And you know what follows that kind of hype, right? Money. Lots and lots of money, especially from the military.
Okay, so this is where the friendly competition starts to get, well, not so friendly. All the fame and funding pouring into Rosenblatt's project started to really rub some people the wrong way, especially Marvin Minsky, who was now a big deal at MIT. See, there was only so much government funding to go around for AI research, and Rosenblatt's brain-inspired approach was sucking up all the oxygen in the room and all the cash. This wasn't just an academic debate anymore. This was quickly turning into a fight for survival.
So the tension is just building and building. What started as polite disagreements in stuffy conference rooms was about to explode into an all-out intellectual war, and Minsky decided it was time to drop a bomb. But not another machine. No, he chose the ultimate weapon in the academic world, a book.
So what was this intellectual bomb? What was the big gotcha moment? It all came down to a really simple logic puzzle called the XOR problem. Just think of it like this. You've got 2 light switches controlling 1 light bulb. You want the bulb to be on only if one switch is on, but off if they're both on or both off. Sounds simple enough, right? Well, Minsky proved with cold, hard math that Rosenblatt's single-layer Perceptron just couldn't solve it. And he argued that this wasn't a minor bug, it was a fatal flaw.
But Minsky didn't just stop with the math. Oh no. He went for the jugular. Right there in the introduction of the book, for the whole world to see, he writes that most of Rosenblatt's work is, and I quote, scientifically worthless. Now you have to understand, in the world of academia, that is not just criticism, that is an execution, an absolutely brutal personal takedown.
Now here's the thing. Rosenblatt and others already knew that you could probably solve the XOR problem by just adding more layers of neurons. But Minsky saw that coming, and this was his killer move. He didn't just point out the flaw, he attacked the solution. He went on to argue that even if you added more layers, it was a dead end because it was computationally impossible to train them. He effectively slammed the door on the entire field of research, locked it, and threw away the key.
And the fallout was immediate. And it was catastrophic. I mean, this is Marvin Minsky we're talking about, one of the most respected figures in the field. When he declares something a dead end, people don't just listen.
they run for the hills. The funding for neural networks completely evaporated, just poof, gone. And that kicked off the very first AI winter, a deep freeze on research that lasted for an entire decade.
And then, just when you think the story can't get any worse, it takes a truly tragic turn. Just 2 years after Minsky's book came out, on his 43rd birthday of all days, Frank Rosenblatt was killed in a boating accident. It was this devastating 1-2 punch. First, the book that discredited his life's work, and then his own sudden death. That's what really solidified the AI winter. His ideas were left without their biggest champion to defend them.
But what if that's not the whole story? What if the official story isn't the real story? What if the accident that cemented the AI winter wasn't an accident at all?
So, the official cause of death is a boating accident in Chesapeake Bay. Simple enough. But when you start to look into it, the public details are weirdly sparse. Was there a collision, mechanical failure, something else? For such a famous scientist, the record is surprisingly quiet.
And it's that lack of detail, combined with the incredibly high stakes of the Minsky-Rosenblatt feud, that led some people to ask a really chilling question. What if he was deliberately eliminated?
Now, okay, let's be super clear. This is pure speculation. But if you're building a conspiracy, the pieces fit together pretty neatly. The motive? Billions in future government funding were on the line. The opportunity? A freak accident on a huge body of water like the Chesapeake Bay is the perfect place to hide something. And the cover-up? No big public investigation, few details released, and his death conveniently ensures that research pivots away from his work for a generation. It's a little too convenient for some.
But here's the ultimate punchline to this whole incredible story. Regardless of how Rosenblatt died, after all of it, the feud, the book, the AI winter, the tragedy, it turns out that on the most important point, Marvin Minsky was completely, fundamentally wrong.
Remember that idea Minsky called a dead end? The one that was supposedly impossible to train? Multilayer networks? Well, that dead end is now the foundation of pretty much everything we call AI today. I'm talking about deep learning, the facial recognition on your phone, the technology that powers ChatGPT, all of it. Its DNA traces directly back to the very ideas Minsky tried to bury.
So, in the end, you could say Frank Rosenblatt got the last laugh, even if he wasn't around to see it. His legacy was finally, and officially, vindicated. In 2004, the IEEE, one of the most prestigious engineering organizations in the world, created the Frank Rosenblatt Award. It was the ultimate stamp of approval, the world finally admitting he was a true pioneer, whose ideas were just way, way ahead of their time.
Which leaves us with this one really tough question to chew on. What was this all about? Was Minsky's takedown just tough, necessary science, pointing out real flaws to keep the field honest? Or was it something more personal? A vendetta that went too far and ended up setting the entire field of artificial intelligence back by a decade? The answer? Well, it's probably just as complicated as the two men at the heart of it all.